You're sitting in a room. Nothing unusual is happening. Someone is talking. A fan is humming in the background. You glance towards the door, and suddenly something feels wrong. Not wrong in the way you normally mean it. You can't point to anything. You just have this strange sensation that you've already experienced this exact moment. You try to remember when. Nothing. You look around again. The room is unfamiliar. The people are unfamiliar. You know you've never been here before, and yet, somewhere inside your mind, there's a quiet certainty saying, no, you have. Then for just a second, you get another feeling. You know what's going to happen next. Maybe someone is about to speak. Maybe the door is going to open. Maybe you'll see something around the corner. You don't know how you know. You just feel certain. And then the moment passes. The room is ordinary again. The feeling is gone. But you're left with something you can't quite explain. Because if you've never experienced the moment before, why does your brain remember it? And if you aren't actually remembering it, what exactly are you feeling? Have you ever wondered, why does deja vu feel so real? There's something strange about deja vu. You don't usually remember an event. You remember the feeling that there was an event. Think about a real memory. You might remember your first day at school, the classroom, your teacher, the people sitting next to you, maybe even something embarrassing that happened. There's something you can actually reach back and retrieve, but deja vu gives you none of that. You don't know when it happened. You don't know where. You don't know who was there. You just know this feels familiar. It's almost like recognizing a song without being able to remember where you heard it. You don't have the story, you only have the feeling. And that matters because your brain doesn't treat familiarity and memory as exactly the same thing. Sometimes you can recognize something without remembering the experience that made it familiar. Usually, that's completely harmless. You see a face and think, I know that person. A few seconds later, you remember who they were. But what happens when the feeling arrives and there's nothing behind it? You're standing in a completely new place and your brain gives you the same signal it normally gives you when you've been somewhere before. Familiar. Except this time, it's wrong, and that's where deja vu begins. Now why would your brain make that mistake? After all, you're surrounded by things you've never seen before. Maybe the room really is new, but your brain isn't just looking at the room as a whole. It's taking in thousands of tiny details. The shape of the doorway, the position of the furniture, the lighting, someone's voice, the way they move, the smell in the room, even the feeling you have while you're standing there. And somewhere in the past, you've probably experienced pieces of those things before. Not necessarily this exact room, not this exact person, just fragments. A hallway that was arranged similarly, a conversation that sounded similar, a particular kind of light, a room that had the same strange shape. Most of the time, your brain doesn't care. It simply uses those similarities to understand the world around you. But occasionally, enough of those pieces line up and something strange happens. Your brain recognizes a pattern before you consciously recognize it. And suddenly, a place you've never seen feels like somewhere you've already been. It's a little like walking into a song halfway through. You don't know the beginning. You don't know where you heard it, but somehow you know the melody. And for a few seconds, your brain mistakes similarity for history. But then something even stranger can happen, because sometimes deja vu doesn't just make the present feel similar, it makes the next moment feel familiar too. You're walking somewhere, deja vu hits, and suddenly You feel like you know what's about to happen. Maybe someone is going to walk past you. Maybe you'll turn the corner and see a particular room. Maybe the person you're talking to is about to say something. You don't have an explanation. You just have this bizarre feeling. I've already seen this. And if the next thing actually happens the way you expect it, the experience can feel almost supernatural. But here's the catch. When people experiencing deja vu are asked to predict what happens next, that feeling of certainty doesn't reliably make them better at predicting it. They feel like they know, but the future doesn't actually become easier to predict. And that makes the experience even more interesting, because your brain can produce something that feels exactly like knowledge without giving you any extra knowledge. Think about how strange that is. We usually assume if I feel certain, I must know something. But deja vu gives us a glimpse of the opposite. Sometimes certainty is just a feeling. And when that feeling becomes strong enough, it can even convince you that you've already lived the next few seconds. Which brings us to one of the strangest questions people ask about deja vu. What if you actually did? Maybe you've experienced it. You're somewhere unfamiliar and suddenly a thought hits you. Wait, I dreamt this. Not just the place, maybe the atmosphere, the lighting, the people. Something incredibly specific. It feels so strange to be a coincidence. So you start wondering, did your brain somehow see this before it happened? Dreams make that possibility especially tempting. Because every night, your brain creates entire worlds, people you've never met, places you've never visited, conversation that never happened. And somehow your brain builds all of it from pieces of your experiences. A face you saw for 2 seconds, a place you passed years ago, something you heard yesterday, a feeling you've been carrying for months, and then you wake up and most of it disappears. So imagine you dreamed about a strange hallway 6 months ago. You don't remember it. And then one day, you walk into a real hallway that share a few of those details. You can't remember the dream, but something about that moment feels familiar. And your mind tries to explain the feeling. Maybe you dreamt this. Maybe you did. But there's a problem. A feeling can't tell you where it came from. It only tells you that something feels familiar. And once you understand that, deja vu becomes much more interesting. Because maybe the mystery isn't where the memory came from. Maybe the mystery is why your brain trusted the feeling in the first place. Think about how rarely you question your own sense of reality. You look at a room and you don't wonder whether it's really your room. You recognize your friend's face and you don't question why you recognize it. You remember something and you don't stop to ask, why does this feel like a memory? Your brain normally handles all that so smoothly that you never notice the process. Deja vu is different. For a few seconds, you become aware of the machinery. You know the moment is new, but it feels old. You know you haven't experienced it before, but something inside you insists that you have. It's almost like your brain has stamped the present with a label that says, I've seen this. And then another part of your mind looks at the label and says, no, you haven't. That's why deja vu feels so surreal. You're not simply fooled. You're aware of the contradiction, and eventually the feeling collapses. The moment continues. You keep walking. The conversation continues. And whatever caused that strange familiarity disappears. But for those few seconds, you caught something that normally stays hidden. You caught your brain trying to make sense of reality. Maybe that's why deja vu is so fascinating, because it feels like it shouldn't be possible. A new moment that feels old. A future moment that feels remembered. A dream that feels like a prediction. But maybe none of those things are actually happening. Maybe something much more ordinary is happening. Your brain is constantly comparing the present with everything that came before. It's searching for patterns, recognizing faces, predicting what happens next, deciding what's familiar, deciding what's new. And most of the time, it gets everything right, so you never notice. But occasionally, something slips. A familiar feeling appears in a completely unfamiliar place. And suddenly, you experience something that feels impossible. Not because you've traveled through time, not because you've seen the future, not necessarily because you've dreamed the moment before, but because your brain has given a new experience the feeling of an old one. And maybe that's the real mystery of deja vu. It's not have I been here before, but how can something feel like a memory when there's nothing to remember? Because for a few seconds, your brain can make you feel certain about something that isn't true. And then just as quickly, it can take that certainty away, leaving you standing there in a place you've never been, with a feeling you can't explain, trying to remember a moment you never lived.